What's up, legends? Welcome to another episode of Optimize Your Body podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Firstly, before we get into this, I've got a really exciting announcement to make. This is going to be very important for you. Listen up. I'm going to be starting a fat loss challenge. It's called the Rapid Fat Loss Challenge. And you're going to lose 5 pounds of fat, and it's free. I just want to stress this, right? This is a free challenge. I've never done this before. And this is going to be open essentially to anyone who qualifies, right? Now, obviously, I have to select people. There's a screening process. Do I select? But bottom line is, it's a free challenge for you to enter. And like I say, you're going to lose 5 pounds of fat within 21 days. Now, I haven't actually got a 100% start date yet, but it is going to be this month. So it's going to be before the end of the month. We're going to be starting this 21-day fat loss challenge, right? And let me just, if I can think of a date now, where we're at now, 8th, it'll be the 15th. This Monday, I think, right? Is that correct? It'll be the 15th this Monday. So yeah, likely be, I reckon, around about the 22nd of July, around about there, give or take. Right? I'm going to go with that date for now. Monday, the 22nd of July is going to be around about there. All right. So anyway, all you got to do, the form is in the show notes. Fill out the form and boom, let's rock and roll, right? So what you're going to get is full access to me. We've got a community as well, a Facebook group. You're going to get all training, nutrition, mindset, everything coaching wise, calls, even coaching calls. So yeah, this is going to be absolutely a life-changing opportunity for you, ladies and gents. And not only to lose the fat, but obviously to keep it off, which is what I always talk about, right? So anyway, just fill out the form in the show notes for the Rapid Fat Loss Challenge if you are interested. If you're not, then, and you want to lose fat, what can I say? You're really missing out. But anyway, so what I want to talk about today, ladies and gents, is I'm going to stick on one topic, but within this one topic, I'm going to drop loads of knowledge bombs, which infuses just some incredible, essentially coaching wisdom and also just information, which is really going to help you level up when it comes to fat loss, overall health, and longevity. So what I find is, ladies and gents, right, I get a lot of questions, a lot of people that I talk to who message me and who I just see give me feedback on content and stuff they're struggling with. And ultimately, a lot of people still think that carbs make you fat. Right? Cutting carbs. I need to cut carbs to get lean and healthy and to hit my goal with fat loss and essentially to stop me eating so much sugar, right? That's what people say a lot. Now, not all carbs are treated equally, first and foremost. But secondly, I want to talk about why actually cutting carbs doesn't work for hardly anyone, right? Cutting carbs when it comes to sustainable fat loss. Now, with certain people with autoimmune issues and they have certain issues with their brain even, when it comes to degeneration of the brain, ketosis has actually been proven in research, the keto diet, to be effective. But the problem is adherence. Very hard to adhere to, right? I did keto. I think I did it for about 10 days a few weeks ago, and I haven't been back since, right? And if I was to say discipline in terms of a percentage, I would give myself a 90% out of 100 through and through. My girlfriend would probably say 99%, but I'm going to give myself 90%, right? Now, it's very hard to adhere to when you cut out carbohydrates. And let's be honest, carbohydrates, we enjoy the taste of those foods more than anything else generally, right? Especially when you combine that with fat. And that's something I'll talk about now because that then makes the food highly palatable, which is why people end up fat or gaining fat. So first of all, a lot of you might think that actually I'm anti-carbs or I'm anti-vegetables or, plants are trying to kill you. You may have found me through, Carnivore podcast and everything else, but I am very open and honest on those podcasts and with interviews with people. And I firmly believe that, the strict carnivore diet is definitely not the right approach for most people. Now, cutting carbs makes zero difference when it comes to fat loss as well. I don't know if anyone knows this, right? But the research is very clear on this, that actually carbohydrates and fats, those two macronutrients, which we tend to enjoy the taste of more, especially when you combine them together, they actually don't make any difference to body composition and to fat loss, right? When protein and calorie intake is equated for. They're the two big rocks when it comes to you losing fat. Having adequate protein. Why? Because when you have adequate protein, you eat less, mainly, right? And then the other reason is calories, right? That's the most important thing when it comes to gaining fat or losing fat. Lose fat, you have to be in a calorie deficit. To gain fat, you have to be in a calorie surplus. I am not going to bore you with all the bullshit, ladies and gents, that everyone is talking about online because most of that is absolute gibberish. You're not here to get information. I'm going to be frank with you, ladies and gents, right? You're not here. You think you're here to just get a bunch of information and then great. right? Now, this is the problem with a lot of people when they digest all this information, they do fuck all with it. So I urge you, ladies and gents, to implement one thing out of the stuff I talk about now, right? And yeah, so going back to that carnivore and eating any kind of diet, whether that's carnivore or keto for that matter, which, essentially restricts carbohydrates, it's not going to be sustainable for most people. Most people cannot adhere to that for a long enough period to actually achieve sustainable fat loss. Now, the issue with cutting carbs as well is when you add them back in, you end up going back to certain habits. Now, when it comes to cutting carbs as well, what I see most people who use extreme approaches to lose fat and essentially fail long term, because that's 90 to 95% of people fail to keep the fat off or the weight off that they lost. Ultimately, they've gone from one extreme to another. Now, they haven't been eating, from my experience, and I think common sense will tell you this, they haven't been eating as a carb source to gain a bunch of fat. They haven't been eating purely berries, avocado, other types of fruit, potatoes, rice, and oatmeal. They haven't just been eating those foods, right? This is common sense. And also, I'll talk about the research on this as well. They've been eating processed foods and they've been eating way too much sugar and generally refined sugars that you get in these ultra processed foods, which are engineered to make us eat the fuck out of them. Excuse my French. I really do apologize if you're playing this in the car with your kids in the car. Yeah, apologies. I did put on YouTube. It's not suitable for kids, right? But if you listen to the podcast, apologies on that. I get passionate about this, but that's what it is. That's why people are gaining weight, because they're eating too much sugar, and they're not just eating bowls of sugar, right? Ladies and gents, you're not getting addicted to eating spoonfuls of white sugar. You're not sitting there in front of your favorite TV show. Oh, I really feel like some of my favorite foods, and pouring a fucking bowl, did it again, pouring a bowl of sugar into a bowl and sitting there and eating the whole bowl of sugar. You're just not doing that, right? What people are doing is they're combining the refined sugars that they're getting from these ultra-processed foods, your chocolates, your cakes, your biscuits. They're combining that with the fats that you get in those ultra-processed foods. And by the way, ladies and gents, I want to be clear here. It's actually not your fault that you're overeating those foods, right? Because those foods have been engineered, like I just said, to make you eat more of them, right? 508 calories a day more, to be precise, based on a study that I believe was done here in Australia. I mentioned this before. It was a cross study as well, where they crossed the groups over because of individual variance with nutrition, and the same thing happened. People ate 500 calories more a day. You're fighting a losing battle, and that's why people go, oh, I'm going to cut all the carbohydrates out now, and I'm going to follow carnivore. They're looking for the answer, and they're avoiding the hard work. I'll say that again, and this might touch a nerve for you as well. If you keep finding yourself in this cycle of following carnivore, and I've got nothing against carnivore. If I'm going to choose any way of eating, I'm going to say it's going to be animal-based, right? I eat carnivore-ish, if you like, but I do eat carbohydrates, and I eat other stuff as well, like dark chocolate, coconut yogurt. I'm not super strict with it, but the bulk of my calories do come from meat and eggs, mainly. I think primarily anyway, if I calculate that. Yeah, animal-based foods anyway. But I'll say this again. You're trying to cut corners and you're trying to take shortcuts instead of doing the work, right? Like all the people I've coached over the years and the journey that I've been on, right? Doesn't happen overnight. You can't just pick a diet and expect to get in great shape for the rest of your life. It's just not going to happen. You can't adhere to it. So the problem then is they're going from cutting out these processed foods, right? They say carbs, right? But they weren't overeating bloody bowls of sweet potato, right? They just weren't doing that. In fact, it's extremely hard to overeat. And that's something I'll talk about now when it comes to fibrous carbohydrates, when you combine that with protein. But yeah, long story short, you can't adhere to it. You're going from one extreme to another. And it's the same story, ladies and gents. Are you noticing I'm communicating the same story a lot of the times, just in a different way, right? Hopefully it'll land differently, right? But I am going to tap into the carbs because that is the topic. But yeah, I'm going on a bit of a rant here because basically it's very simple, ladies and gents. Right. And if you choose not to do any of the simple stuff, which is not easy, right? I get it. It's hard, habit change, blah, blah, blah. But, what's actually much harder than making some of these subtle changes, or even better, getting stuck into this 21-day fat loss challenge, ladies and gents, because I'm going to give you all of the insight. This is just, little drips of information and wisdom you're getting on these podcasts. You're not getting the Optimize Your Body methods. On this 21-day fat loss challenge, you're literally getting coaching and you're getting everything you need, right, to lose fat and finally keep it off, right? I'll say that one more time. But if you even if you don't join the challenge, then I got to say, you're a bit dumb if you don't. But if you, sorry, don't take that personally, but take it personally if you want. So basically, you really want to, you basically want to take something out of this and implement it, right? So carbohydrates, again, they're not all treated equally, like I said at the start. So, the only reason I would say to cut out certain carbohydrates like vegetables, like I have out of my diet, I did this 4 years ago, is if you get any immune issues, aka gut issues, is 80% of the immune system is located in the gut. I was getting gut and skin issues, and I actually still do get some skin issues. Luckily, my gut, I've pretty much fixed it now, but I do get skin issues as a result of bringing in certain plant compounds, right? I notice when I eat, anyway, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but fibrous carbohydrates are actually beneficial when it comes to losing fat, right? What does work is if you're, number one, having enough protein. Let me kind of tie this together now, right? Because fibrous carbohydrates being, I'm talking about whole foods. Again, it always goes down to whole foods, single ingredient foods like your potatoes, your berries, your avocado, your fruit, although you don't really want to, go too crazy in lots of fruit. I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing that every day because you're still going to have loads of sugar that you don't necessarily need. But I would recommend, like I say, potatoes, even having some, oatmeal here and there if you can digest. Actually, I don't really recommend oatmeal because they contain too many anti-nutrients. But, potatoes, even rice, I would recommend white rice. Is not fibrous, it's low in fiber. But, having a little bit of white rice here and there is fine because it's easier to digest if you struggle with fibrous carbohydrates like white or sweet potatoes, and fruit, basically. And, throwing in a bit of honey here and there is normally fine. But again, even with honey, because it's a simple sugar, that can be an issue as well. You gotta have the right combination. If you're having honey, you always want to go back to the most important thing, which is having a high protein, complete meal before you're having that honey. If you're having honey on its own, it's just having straight sugar, and it's going to make you want to eat loads. It's going to drop your blood sugar levels and everything else. So, just to kind of summarize with carbohydrates making you fatter, cutting carbohydrates making you fatter. I'll say that again, right? Cutting carbohydrates are potentially making you fatter, right? Why is that? Because you're taking extreme approaches. I'm going to cut all the sugar out because you're not cutting whole food carbohydrates out, right? You might be doing that as well, right? As well as sugar, and boom, you can't stick to what you were doing with the restrictive approach you were taking. And then you gain the fat back. And then what happens? Like I've said before, when you lose fat, gain it back, lose fat, gain it back, and you keep repeating that cycle, the body actually goes, okay, I need to get better and more efficient with calories, going back to what I said last year. And I'm going to make permanent fat cells, by the way. There's some research on this now to show that when you lose fat, gain it back, and you do that yo-yo dieting enough times, your body starts storing permanent fat cells. That's not temporary. That means every time you try and lose fat, then you might have that extra, but you might have noticed this if you listen to this, because I even noticed this when I did a comp, a little bit of stubborn fat, which is not shifting, right? Don't play with fire. Don't play these games of short-term cutting things out and, going back to square one. You have to be smart with your approach, right? So now on the flip side, like I said, if you get immune issues, you get issues with your gut like I did, or you get problems like serious autoimmune issues. Some people have like really serious autoimmune reactions from eating certain plants and vegetables. But for most people, they're totally fine, right? If you cook them properly and everything else. So that's what it is. So summarize, that's why really carbs can be making you fatter. Because you can't adhere to like a keto or carnivore or just even a low carb diet, like a restrictive low carb diet, because when you bring them back in, and then especially when you start mixing fat and carbs together, even if it's not whole foods, even if it's not processed food. For me, for example, I can get away with more calories, right? What I do is I have coconut yogurt with fruit, right? And basically some honey and stuff like that. And basically, even that, and I do this strategic. I don't have that on its own as a snack. I don't believe in having carbs and fat together as a snack. That's going to make you want to eat more and it promotes poor behaviors. I'll have that after my main meal in the evening. And even that, even though it's high in fiber with the fruit and everything, because I'm having banana, and in the banana, you're looking at like 20 to 30 grams of sugar, even though it's high in fiber, I have them every day. Even that, I find sometimes I can go back and just eat more than I need to. You know what I mean? Because it's a combination of the coconut yogurt is pure fat, saturated fat, and the fruits are basically sugar, right? So especially a banana. If I'm having berries, it's not quite the same. But if I'm having banana or I'm throwing honey in there, going back to my point, I find it hard sometimes to stop when I should stop. And I know if I just waited 15 minutes and went on a walk, I wouldn't be hungry. But I'm sat there and I just continue sometimes. So, combining fats with carbs can be a problem. But yeah, going back to what I was saying then, I kind of lost my trail of thought. Cut a long story short, it'll make you fatter doing that for most people. Simple as that, really. I hope you get my message there. I know I kind of intertwined and went off on a bit of a rant, But I think it's good when I do that because ultimately you can see the experience I've got with myself and just the wisdom that's coming out here. This is based on, coaching bloody hundreds of people over the years, right? So yeah, that's pretty much that. But I want to kind of elaborate a bit more on this now and give you some fire here, some gems that you can potentially implement. Really, really simple stuff, really. But with where you're at when it comes to eating, and that's one thing I want to say as well with carbohydrates, eating them, the combinations of carbohydrates that you eat with your meals is really important. So having, for example, protein and fiber. I don't think I mentioned this last week. I was thinking about that. I didn't mention this last week. A very simple strategy. If you can take this one thing away, again, there's some gems here, but this one thing is powerful, right? When you're eating out, or even when you're cooking your own meals, ladies and gents, right? Rather than being overly restricted and I'm going to not eat carbs ever again, you're lying to yourself, right? Let's just say that how it is. You're lying to yourself. Basically, okay, I'm going to eat carbohydrates. And do you know what? Even if you fancy some white bread, God forbid, right? If you fancy some bread or you fancy some pasta, right? Even when it comes to like potatoes and rice, I would say this applies as well, right? Or quinoa, or any kind of grains or starchy type of carbohydrates. Eat your protein and fibrous protein and vegetables. When I say vegetables are high in fiber, now potatoes actually are starchy carbs, right? So that's a different type of carbohydrates. I'm talking about your cruciferous vegetables like your broccoli, your cauliflower, your spinach, those kind of things. If you can digest those things, you don't get any digestive issues, cook them properly. Otherwise, that's going to be a problem. You never eat them raw. That's just dumb. That's when you're really asking for trouble. Generally, some people okay in salad leaves and stuff, but risky. Basically, eat your meats. That's number one, right? Protein is the big rock. Protein is the most satiating macronutrient. Fiber comes way after that when it comes to keeping you more satiated. But eat your meat first. Let's say you want to have your bread or you want to have whatever that is afterwards. Even if you're going to have like dessert or something like that. Something obviously you would never eat that first anyway, but you never know with some people. Forget about the dessert thing. Just starchy carbohydrates, bread, pasta, those kind of things. Even potatoes, rice, right? Eat your meat and vegetables first. Vegetables being not potatoes, anything other than potatoes, right? Your cruciferous vegetables, like I said, your broccoli, your cauliflower, your spinach, those kind of things, or even like your bell peppers or something like that, right? When you make a stir fry, or even onion that you're going to have if you're having a stir fry with your meat, for example, right? So eat your meat and your vegetables first. Fill yourself up on those two things. In other words, protein, number one. That is going to change the game for you, right? By having a good amount of protein with each meal, meat, in other words, mainly, or eggs. And fiber, your vegetables. Eat those two things first, and then give yourself permission to move on to what you were going to eat. I guarantee you'll eat less. The biggest problem people make is they're mindless and they quite simply don't care enough about getting fatter. It's as simple as that, really. You don't care enough about being metabolically unhealthy and what's coming for you later down the line. And that's what I was going to say earlier. That's what's hard. Oh, it might be hard having your protein and vegetables first to start with, although you'll enjoy it, right? And you'll totally be fine. However, it's much harder when you got to get bloody prescription drugs and you've got metabolic health issues and chronic illness like diabetes later down the line. That's much harder, ladies and gents, right? Than this type of hard. So basically pick your hard. So having that and then move on to your bread or your pasta or whatever after you've eaten your protein and fiber, your meat and vegetables, in other words, or your meat and salad or vegetables. And then boom, you'll eat less. Great behavior to promote, especially when you're eating out. If you're eating out and you're going on a social event or whatever, have a look at the menu. Right, let me see it. Every now and then, ladies and gents, you're going to just have a fucking pizza. I get it, right? But look at it in advance. Okay, look at the menu. Can I have meat and salad first? Is it that much to ask? Something that you enjoy, right? Boom. Then do that. And then each whatever you're going to have afterwards, give yourself that permission. You'll eat less. And it's just a good thing to cement in a habit. Protein, fiber, mainly protein. Again, I don't have fiber I actually have fiber with most of my meals because I have avocado in my first meal, but I don't have vegetables at all, really, right? I enjoy vegetables, but they mess my gut up. So anyway, that's a simple little gem, right? So out of all the things here, when it comes to getting leaner and getting healthier, right? We've talked about the carb stuff. A simple thing, again, like the thing is, ladies and gents, you don't want to bite off more than you can chew. This is where most people go wrong. A simple thing, which can be a game changer for you, right, is simply hydrating in the morning before you have your coffee. So have a glass of water before you have your coffee, right? Game changer. You wake up in the morning dehydrated, you lose a lot of water in your sleep. And most people just reach straight for coffee. And not only that, it doesn't do your energy any favors either. Actually, you'll have, if you notice you get an afternoon crash, like I noticed this myself just by messing around with this. I had like a liter of water. I have a liter of water when I get up anyway, within the first kind of 30 minutes, but a liter of water. And then I won't have my coffee Well, I have been now, been having it a bit earlier, probably about 30 minutes to 60 minutes after I wake on the way to the gym. But I went through and I've noticed just by doing that and hydrating first, I used to have coffee straight away, have a liter of water. I have my element as well, my electrolytes with my first bit of water, with my second pint of water. And basically then I'll just literally have my coffee after, and my energy, there's research to show that actually you'll get more sustained energy, better mood and stuff like that. Because what happens in the morning, your stress hormones are high, right? Your cortisol levels are high, your adrenal system is in action. And what you're doing when you're having coffee, again, what are you doing? You're elevating stress hormones and you're putting your adrenal system into overdrive. And what you're doing, long story short, is you're interrupting the body's natural processes in the morning, right? And then, hydrating then is going to obviously work wonders for your energy. But literally having a glass of water before you have your first coffee, you don't have to wait 60, 90 minutes. If you get up and have coffee, have a glass of water before that. Boom, do that. Make that a habit. It can take a long time, ladies and gents. It can take a long time. Let's just say, 1 month to 3 months or however long it takes to cement that habit in so it becomes second nature, right? Yeah. So do that. Glass of water before your coffee in the morning. I mentioned about the protein and fiber. And a big thing I want to touch on today, ladies and gents, is mindful eating. I'm not going to go deep down this rabbit hole. I could do a whole podcast on this, and I have done in the past because it is a kind of big conversation. But long story short, people eat 15% more calories a day when they're distracted, right? When they're eating mindlessly, like shoveling food down your throat. This is what most people do. I look around and see it. Shoveling down your food while scrolling on your phone, on social media, or sitting in front of your desk, plowing through your meal, typing away, replying to emails at the same time. Or what most people do, and what I used to do, is sitting in front of the TV, in the evenings or on the weekends, or both, stuffing food into your mouth and watching your favorite TV show. You're distracted. And it doesn't sound like a great deal, right? 15% more calories. You add that up, and that's the difference between getting fat and not getting fat, essentially, or gaining loads of body fat. And then maybe it depends on what else you're doing, right? But it's a lot, ladies and gents, the compound effect of that. Night and day difference. Like that'll take years off your life, essentially, right? If you add all that up, over consuming calories and gaining fat and damaging your metabolic health. So I would focus on this one habit, right? And I don't get me wrong, ladies and gents, right? I understand people work and sometimes you just got to work, right? You're working, I've got to get my meal down me and I've got to get this. I get that every now and then, right? But when it's in your control, do your best to sit down and make it a practice to sit down at the table if you can, or just sit down in an allocated place if you're in the office and eat your meal. I listen to a podcast by all means, right? Instead of looking at your phone or watching TV, listen to a podcast. Or if you're speaking to people, great. If you're sat down in a social, even better, right? You're having a good conversation, that's fantastic. But if you're, messing around on your phone or watching TV, that's a nightmare. So basically listen to a podcast or audiobook or whatever whilst you're eating your food. Focus on chewing your food. That's a big part of the digestive process. Actually chewing your food. And I'm not the best at this, to be honest. I shovel my food down quite quick, but I am more aware now that I never look at my phone or anything like that when I'm eating. That's just a non-negotiable habit I've cemented in. I listen to a podcast and that's that really. So yeah, so definitely focus on that. It's a simple little hack there. We always associate, don't we, like going to the cinema or eating in front of the TV with eating food. Bad idea, ladies and gents, right? So again, I know that's a lot. Even if you can implement one of those things that I said there, whether that's having a glass of water in the morning before you have your coffee, protein and fiber, boom, one or two of these things, maybe protein and fiber before you eat the starchy carbohydrates, right? Mindful eating, not being on your phone, not being distracted when you're eating, sit down, make it an allocated thing. If you're at home and you're working from home, great, sit down at your table like you normally would and make it like, don't sit in the living room, for example, on your couch eating. Make it the proper allocated place that you eat, right? Make it a practice and a ritual. So that's all I want to talk about today, ladies and gents. Some really good knowledge bombs there as usual. There was one thing. No, I'm not going to mention that. I'm going to waffle on too much if I talk about that. I can save that for the next podcast. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say in a nutshell, ladies and gents. But yeah, just to kind of summarize with the carbohydrates thing, I know I tied in a lot of information there, right? But number one, cutting carbohydrates is quite simply not the answer to getting lean. And I haven't even talked about the benefits from eating good quality carbohydrates when it comes to performance. I've mentioned this before, thyroid function as well, right? Really important for metabolism, for actually losing fat and getting a functioning thyroid system and metabolic rates, actually having some carbohydrates. Now, I want to be clear here as well to summarize. Do I think that most people should go without carbohydrates at the time? Yes, absolutely. I really do, because it throws a curveball. It teaches you what true hunger is. because a lot of times, even when we're eating, you know, good quality carbohydrates, that really depends. Really, I wouldn't really say that. No, I wouldn't really. I don't want to say that because I think that's not what most people need to worry about. Like, I think when you're eating processed foods, the most important thing you want to take away from this podcast is removing processed foods. Right, those things hijack your hunger signals. Going back to what I was saying, processed foods. So if you can avoid them like the plague and just don't store them in the house. And when you do your food shop, don't go to the supermarket hungry first and foremost, because that's when you're likely to buy more of those processed foods, right, or highly palatable foods. And just be smart and just pick single ingredient foods. Do that when you do your food shop. But yeah, look, you know, I think you should throw a curveball. I think you should every now and then dip into keto, and it depends on the level you're at. I really think a lot of people have no place cutting carbs out, period, or restricting anything just because of the mindset around it and their history with food and yo-yo dieting, all those kind of things. But I think for people at a certain level, I'd like to reframe this. People at a certain level where they're eating, you know, 90 to 95% whole foods, they're in great shape, you know, they're lean all year round as a side effect of the habits and the decisions they're making with food. And they've got a good relationship with food and themselves. Yeah, okay, throw in that curveball and, you know, restricting carbs and eating maybe a carnivore diet for a month or even a week or 2 weeks, like I do, the level I'm at, or keto, fantastic. That throws a curveball, and you know, it can help reduce inflammation. It can kind of reset certain things. It can, you know, do quite a number of different things. And obviously, when you put yourself into ketosis, it's anti-inflammatory, all those kind of things, right? So I think there can be benefit in doing that, but I think the majority of you listening to this, cutting carbs is not what you should be doing to achieve sustainable results when it comes to sustainable fat loss and just getting results in general. Even if you're at a higher level, then, you know, basically mixing it up and carb cycling and, you know, cutting them out to get a bit leaner, not always the best idea. Now, there's some value. Don't get me wrong. I have some clients where they're doing a cut now because it's summertime. One of my clients I can think now in the US, you know, he does better when he reduces carbs. He doesn't do keto or carnivore, but he's a low carb diet when he's cutting, when he's in a calorie deficit, because he finds it easier to eat less, essentially, right? So it looks different to everyone, but that's what I'd like to summarize that with, right? Cutting carbohydrates generally is going to make you fatter over time, because of the lack of adherence and the vicious cycle of losing fat, gaining it back, and going back to old behaviors. Just to kind of summarize this. All right, ladies and gents, one more little reminder. The challenge is in the show notes. All you got to do is answer a couple of questions, and then, you know, I'll see if you qualify for the challenge. And it's a free rapid fat loss challenge over a 21-day period. Don't miss out on this. All right, over and out, ladies and gents. Thanks for listening. Hey, folks. So I just wanted to say I've thought about the start date for the challenge since recording the podcast, and I'm thinking of doing it on either the 5th, starting either the 5th of August or a week after that on the 12th of August. All right. So it'll either finish towards the end of August if we start on the 5th, or it'll finish on the 1st of September if we start on the 12th of August. I think I've got calculated that right. Yeah, that is correct. All right, ladies and gents. So, like I said, the form is beneath in the show notes.